So it's getting someone just to identify that they aren't their thoughts in the very first place, and just being a bit more aware of their thoughts, like this noise, this radio station sort of thing, but giving them the awareness that they can choose to listen or pause or be aware of those thoughts, and maybe having greater awareness of what they can put in.
G'day legends, and welcome back to another episode of the Cricket Mentoring Podcast. Today's episode is going to be full of value as we discuss something that I'm really passionate about and we're passionate about here at Cricket Mentoring. I grew up in a small town in Central Australia, and boy do I wish when I was a teenager or even a young adult I had access to one of these two amazing people. I have no doubt that I would have had a longer, more successful career had I had access to a mentor like these two. We have two experts joining us today from different parts of the world. We have Katie in the UK and we have Nick over in Melbourne. And Katie, firstly, works with athletes and Olympic teams, professional, national, universe, county, and amateur level. Katie has an amazing story, which she's going to share with us in a minute. But she's also been working with some athletes in the cricket mentoring community. So firstly, Katie, welcome to the Cricket Mentoring Podcast.
Hi, it's really great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Great to have you here, Katie, and great to have got to know you over the last couple of years. And our second guest is someone I've got to know over the last few months. He's been a really active contributor in the cricket mentoring community, adding lots of value. Nick is a speaker, author of the book Make the Moments Count, and a peak performance thought leader. He's helped hundreds of athletes from many, many different sports, and he is based in Melbourne. So welcome, Nik Badkundri.
Spot on, Scholes. Thank you. Appreciate you sharing the platform and having me here today. Look forward to contributing, and exciting times ahead.
I hope I got your last name right. But Katie, let's go over to you first. Please, can you just give our listeners and viewers a bit of an insight into your story, your journey, and how you got into what you're currently doing? Because it is an amazing story.
Yeah, well, thank you as well for providing this platform to be able to share these insights. And I think what you're doing is just amazing to be able to reach out and make these changes and help people along their way. But I got into this, I've been doing this now for over 20 years, so it's been a while. I was going for the GB trials for rowing, and I thought that was going to be my future. I was age 19. And that was my focus. And then I contracted a very rare virus that actually paralysed me from the chest down. It all happened within sort of 48 hours. And so my life changed a lot. So I was hospitalised for 3 months, wheelchair for 8 months, put into a home to learn how to be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. Checked myself out the same day because I thought if I stay here, I will be conditioned to being in a wheelchair. And basically through the love of my parents as well and support, which, all of the support, like you were saying, is so important in life, whatever that life is. I basically taught myself how to walk again through many, many journeys, and it's been a tough one, but I then wasn't able to get back to my sport. But I realised what I'd been through. I needed to share, and I knew that my purpose was to help people be the best that they can be. And it really showed me the power of belief and how strong the human spirit is. And this is what I do now. I then went back, and sports psychology 20 years ago wasn't really talked about. So I ended up actually going out to America to train in sports psychology. And I worked with a Dr. Spencer Johnson out there, who was an international bestseller, very well-known chap, and worked alongside him, worked with a lot of corporate 500 businesses to do with mindset, but my passion was always in my sport. So eventually, after 6 years, I returned to England, and I had the pleasure of working with Dame Kelly Holmes, who had, I don't know how internationally she's known, but she won 2 gold medals, and at the Athens Olympics, an amazing woman. So I started off being her sports psychologist for all her academies. And through that's where I started doing a lot of work with Olympians, Paralympians, and I've just worked internationally. And I love what I do. And I think it's having that connection and enabling people to connect with themselves and to have that true belief, to realise how powerful they already are. And it's almost holding a mirror up to let people step into their power. But as you can see, I'm really passionate about what I do, and it's just a joy. It's just a joy, and it's always evolving. We're always learning. So, but thank you for having me here today.
No, thank you, Katie. It's an inspiring story. It's one I've come to know. You're also an author yourself, aren't you?
Yes, I actually have my book published. Oh, I was told I'd never have children, and I've now got 2 children. And the book was actually published 6 weeks after my firstborn, so that was all quite interesting. Yes, and I know I've got another book in me, but it's going to be happening at some point, but not quite yet. But yeah, first book was published. I should know the date of my son's birthday, 2014.
Yeah, amazing. Well, it is an inspiring story, and congratulations on everything you've achieved. I've got no doubt. I know that you're going to give a lot of value today to our listeners. Nik, tell us a bit about your journey and how you got into what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Just firstly acknowledging the fact that writing a book, Katie, isn't the easiest thing. It takes, I know I had some sleepless nights when I was writing mine, so kudos and congrats on the publication. Similar to Katie, my story was also about 22 years ago now when I was really young playing cricket in India. That was when I was 14, 15. I was playing at a decent level back then. I had an injury after trying to impress this girl on the sideline, actually, and doing some weird things on the ball. And I broke my leg from knee down. It had about 15 to 20 breaks. One thing led to the other. I never really recovered, and that led to me going back to sport after my injury, and my performance was nowhere close to where it was before injury. And it just completely tanked, from being sort of that star batter, star performer, to not being able to score about 5, 10, 15, 20 runs and contribute towards the team's well-being, and teams sort of winning as well. And that led me to just give up the sport at that point in time. I became a bit of a recluse. I started getting really angry at anything and everything. So all of this to say that the journey really started about 20 years ago, which really then pushed me down the path of understanding performance psychology, what exactly happens when someone goes through that aspect of an injury. What does a rehab process look like? How does the mind actually play a role in getting someone back to where they really want to? Like yourself as well, Scholes, if I had someone back then, helping me with the mental side of the game, I'm pretty confident I would have been in the IPL. I mean, it's easier for me to say that because the IPL was kicking off at that point in time. But that's really how I came to this field, and this field was introduced as a result of that. I always say that everything happens for us, not to us. And even though IPL did not happen to me, I am in the space now helping so many athletes that I've done over so many years. That actually gives me joy to see how they can actually perform and how I can help them and get the best out of them. I always say it's not about unlocking any potential. The potential is always within you. It is about my work with you is to make sure that you realize your own potential, which is not limited, which is actually boundless. And that's the crux of the work that I do with every athlete. And I'm sure we'll get into how and all of those good things over this conversation.
No, that's amazing as well, and congratulations to you on what you've done. Yeah, some similar ideas there with Katie with the mirror, sort of just reflecting what's already in you. So I'm keen to sort of tap into that a bit more. Let's go back to you to start with, Nik. So what do you actually do? How are you helping athletes on a day-to-day basis?
Absolutely. So I help athletes on the mental side of the game. I firmly believe that whatever happens on the field is just one component. 90% of the times, what happens is outside of the field, the athlete takes that onto the field, and that results in their performance and just going up and down. What I quite simply mean by that is if something is not the way they want it to be in their personal life, they're bound to take that into their professional life, and therefore the performance takes a backseat as a result. I was working with a cricketer recently, actually a Big Bash league cricketer, and he had a lot of things that were actually going on in his personal life as it related to his family. Every time he was stepping onto the field, all he was thinking about is that going to be okay? Is my family going to be okay with everything that they're going through? Now, when someone plays with that sort of a mindset, they are bound to actually show up differently in the way they train and on game day, because they are letting those thoughts intrude their state of being in the moment, which is beta training or on game day. Now, as a result, their performance was, sort of just going down. From a striker of about 170, 180, their striker was about a 120. Their average was, nowhere close. That resulted in them being dropped. So to summarize that, my work is really, yes, on the performance side of things as it relates to sport, but it is also ensuring that there is freedom outside of that and they understand who they are, not just in sport, but outside of that as well. Now, when they've got those two distinctions, and I call them characters, if they've got those two characters, then they can just be the character that they want to be, perform in the sport that they want to perform, and then go outside of that and live the life that they can live. That's really my work with them, and we can touch on the specifics of it as well. But for me, what really the framework that I would use to help someone within that context is anchored on sort of two things. One is, I call it the story state strategy model, and the other one's the be do have model.
Okay, cool. Well, I look forward to unpacking that a bit more as we go. Katie, tell us a bit about what you're doing with athletes.
Okay, I think my approach, it's lovely hearing your very much holistic approach, which I think when we spoke the other day, it's really nice that we're coming from the same place, because over the years, I've had athletes. I can remember an Olympian I was working with coming to me, and I love how this arena has changed quite a lot, because even though I've got my sports psychology, that I see as one area, whereas I think over the years, throughout the world, I've trained in all these other aspects that kind of become part of your toolbox. And I think it's so important to be working with the whole person rather than just having one aspect. Sports psychology is great, it's got the tools, but you need to go into that person to find that connection, to help them identify who they truly are in order for all of that to be unlocked. And then you can add the tools into it. And I can remember this Olympian who had won previous gold medals, and you'd think, oh, he's got all this confidence, but he started talking about some things that he was having in his life that weren't related to his sport. And I can remember him saying then, but I'm not sure if I can share this with you, because that's where I need to go and get a counsellor for that. And I was really shocked. And I think this is where it is about that whole person, because unless you can unwrap what's actually going on in life, which I think this is why with Skulls, with this platform that you've created with your members, you have seen how this impacts you as a person and a player. And it can't just be the player, it's the whole person. So I start very simply, because I believe all of this, everything in life can become overcomplicated. And I think once we strip back and really go back to the simple things, that's when things can be unlocked. So when I'm working with someone, I start with really three very simple questions. What do you want to gain more of? So people are starting to really identify what is it that they really want. And often I've found over the years, there are so few things really. It's generally confidence is always the biggest one. And this is why today working on this is just brilliant. And then it's like your negative thinking, your thoughts, and unwrapping that, which I'm sure we'll go into in a lot more detail today. And then it can be, beliefs, focus, but there aren't many things. And then the next question is, but isn't it funny, isn't it? Once you strip things back, Nik, it is so simple. And I think people, once they identify with the simple, that's when changes can really happen. And then it's things that they want to let go of. And it might be that negative thinking that's holding them back. And like what we're probably going to cover today, nerves, but it's these sort of things. And they see that and they're kind of like, oh, and then you start to see how everything is interconnected. And then I always hold myself accountable. How will you know it's happened? How will you know that mind training has worked? And that I connect to a feeling. It's never about outcome, because as soon as you start going to outcomes, you're getting people to focus on the future. And there's no point in focusing on the future, because you can't control that. And you're distracting yourself from what's truly important, which is now, really living and being in the present. And obviously in sport, you know, you've got being in the zone and all this kind of mystical place. But actually, by truly being present, you then aren't thinking. You haven't got your thoughts. You are completely, and I'm normally quite careful with the word, using the word control. You know, it's nurturing what you can control and where your focus is, focusing on what you want to happen. Past, we learn from it. You know, it's all about the learnings. And this is what I heard from the last two podcasts as well, which I really liked, all about the learnings and the reflections. But
Yeah.
it is about really being present right now. And with that, it's just tapping in, helping that person find the connection together, seeing how all the things that they're wanting to let go of and the things they want to gain, how they all actually mesh together. And it is such a simple, beautiful process that basically by changing some beliefs, working with the subconscious mind, enable people to step into their own power, their true authentic self. But none of this is rocket science, you know, and
Yeah.
it is just, allowing people to be the best that they can be.
Absolutely. That's
That
that's
is
very eloquent, very British as well, very eloquent at the same
very good.
time.
Well
We're
said.
international
Yeah.
here.
But, the only thing I was going to say to that as well, I mean, that is so true. It is, I speak in codes, you know, I speak in codes and metaphors when I work with my athletes so that they can go from the tangible to the intangible and make sense of it. And I use that a past hurt informs a future fear. That is not an original. I've actually read that somewhere, but that's so resonated. It's like whatever's happened in your past, now you're holding on to that past, avoiding the repetition of that in the present, and therefore your future appears to be bleak for you all of a sudden. Now, what is happening as a result of that is your physiological state is being very different as a result of it, because your mind is now in this time warp of past and future at exactly the same time in the present. The concept of past and future only exists in language. And when someone really gets that, and that is what I call the concept of collapsing psychological time, when someone really gets that, if they do collapse psychological time, all they have is the present moment. They actually don't have a choice. All they have to be in is the present moment. And when someone is in the present moment, that's when they can access the zone. Be in that state where flow just happens, where you're fully present, fully committed, you understand what's going on. I think the best example that comes to mind was, and Virat Kohli's done a couple of videos after his knock in the T20 World Cup against Pakistan. And, you know, I don't know the exact amount of runs India needed, but he hit the six just with the front foot. And you can hear him speak about what exactly was going on in his mind. It was like, nothing. I was blank. Hardik came and said a couple of things and I did not hear anything. Dravid came and said a couple of things. I did not hear anything. All I was doing was just focusing on the ball, and that just happened. That just happened is that flow state, is when he wasn't thinking about what's going to happen in the future. He wasn't held on by an event in the past. He was just fully present in the moment that led him to execute that shot.
Yeah, amazing. So, Katie, let's go back to you. How do you then help an athlete become present? Because for me, in my presentations and when I talk about mental skills, it is the number one skill any athlete needs to perform at their best is the ability to focus on the present moment. But that's theory. How do you, Katie, and then we'll go to you, Nik, how do you actually help an athlete? I'm working with a young tennis player now, so my sort of understanding of mindset, I guess, is transferred across to tennis, and I'm working with this young boy, and him and his family came and sat with me sort of nearly 2 years ago, and they said, we need to become more present. His mind, like if he's losing or he's either in the past or the future. So it's not just the cricket thing, it's a whole athlete. It doesn't matter what sport, I guess. So, Katie, how do you deal with that?
Absolutely, because I've never specialised in one sport, actually. I work, you know, I've had some really random sports as well. And I think, like you say, everything is completely transferable. And in a way, I found it advantageous working across all sports, because there's been some sports where, because you're not so attached to it, you go, well, why can't you do that? Why can't you use that skill in there? And you kind of come at it. And it's always then challenging you to think of outside the box a bit more. I think, the whole concept of being present, it's a really interesting one, that it's choosing where you put your focus. There's obviously lots of tools. We were talking the other day, Skulls, about meditation, and I've done so many different types of meditation. Again, this is where these concepts can get overcomplicated, and it's kind of searching for all this magical thing that's going to be right for, and so often people try too many things. And it is about working with the athlete to identify what is right for them. But basically, even if we looked at sort of meditation for getting you present, in the world that we're living in now, there is so much noise. This external noise going on, which is this distraction, taking us away from being truly present. So I think where I start working with someone is getting them to identify that they aren't their thoughts. So in a day, you might have over 100,000 thoughts, which is bonkers. It's crazy. All this noise, and now you add social media to it, screen time, and it's just so much noise. So it's getting someone just to identify that they aren't their thoughts in the very first place, and just being a bit more aware of their thoughts, like this noise, this radio station sort of thing, but giving them the awareness that they can choose to listen or pause or be aware of those thoughts, and maybe having greater awareness of what they can put in. But instead of just like really pushing away their thoughts and having a fight, this isn't about fight. This is about having that freedom and that flow to be truly present. So once they've got that awareness of just being truly present, you can have things like your breath work. If you focus on your breath, even just taking 3 deep breaths, focus on your breath, you can't have thoughts, which is really powerful in itself. But these thoughts, that's where they can be fueling your beliefs. This is where they can be changing where your focus is. So it's really important to kind of strip it down and go, right, what thoughts help me? What thoughts maybe hinder me? Where are my controls? What is my focus? What is it I want to achieve? But really getting it back and finding that joy in that space, identifying with that person. And, like with the mindfulness that you mentioned as well, that in itself was just helping and aiding with focus. But just by really being in the moment, being in the now, because once you're there, the whole world sort of can change. Things can calm down. You can actually gain. Time becomes almost distorted. But it's, it's focusing on the good. And when with that, the good just seems to get better, doesn't it? And then you're just in that present moment and focused to enable you to be the best that you can be.
Amazing. And that's what is so incredible about elite athletes, that they can do that with so much noise going on. Like I work with so many young cricketers that go and play on the weekend, and there's mum and dad and 20 people watching, but they are in their own head. It's the biggest deal. It's the biggest thing in the world. But then you watch on TV and you watch a World Cup or an Olympics or something, the athletes you guys are working with, and they're able to bring their best in these ultra hugely watched and big moments. And that's sort of being present, bringing their skill set or their best to those moments, which is remarkable.
Yeah. I think another thing that I work, based around that is the importance of routines as well. Because when you've got a routine that you're really focused on what it is that you need to do, that is just bringing in the process. And with that, I can remember working with this footballer. There was this great manager that I was working with, and this footballer, you could tell that it wasn't him that was coming into the room wanting the advice. The manager had kind of gone, go and see Casey. So he walked in and he was like all like this. And but it was identifying with him what it was, as he was going out there, and obviously they're in these, really big settings. But I was asking him, I was like, what's going on? And he was sort of saying, my heart rate's going up, and I'm getting all stressed, and I'm just not in that present moment. I'm focusing on what could go wrong. And we just created some really simple routines. I was like, well, what is it that you want? And I think so often people are focusing on what they don't want rather than actually what they want. And for him, it was for his breath to feel in control. It was his body to feel fluid, but he was doing everything the opposite of what he wanted. So we created some really simple routines. I think it was visualization, some breath work, to get him really present. And then I just said, go and practice this for a week and I'll see you next week. And then he came back in, and this time he was like a lot more open. You could see there were changes that had happened. And we started talking, and then he just started laughing. And I was like, what? He's like, I've just been going out there and I've kind of forgotten. I've moved past, those thoughts aren't even there anymore. And that's the beauty in this. It's just getting people to nurture what they want and then enabling them, doing some changes with the subconscious mind and their beliefs. It's so much about beliefs, and where your focus is. And you kind of do that, and the changes happen so quickly. Sometimes it feels like there's magic. There is so much magic around us. We are superhumans. Once we can change these beliefs to enable us to be the best that we can be. So yeah, it was beautiful to see.
Amazing. I'm keen to dig a bit deeper on routines and the importance of them and how they help in a minute. But Nik, tell us specifically how you might help a young, struggling athlete who comes to you and says, I need to be more present. I'm distracted a lot. I'm thinking about the wrong things.
Yeah, great question. And, Katie, very well articulated. My process isn't too dissimilar to what Katie described. It's fairly in the same ballpark. What I'll just preface that by saying is just this change that we are talking about. I always say that change takes a long time coming, but it always happens in that moment. And that really helps an athlete get that, yeah, cool, I'll put in this effort, but I know that it's just going to happen one day when I just show up, because they have practiced that over time, which is just slightly touching on routines. But to answer your question quite specifically, a lot of this goes down to personalization, because personalization is the key over here. If I don't understand what the athlete is specifically going through, then there is no point in us crafting anything for them in the form of how they can be present in the moment. So the process that I undertake usually is, like Katie said, it's not they that they are their thoughts. It's like what you're experiencing is ... So the moment you create that distance, the moment you create that space from who they are versus these are just their thoughts, that actually gives them a bit more domain. That actually gives them a bit more sovereignty to think about, oh, I am actually not this. I'm actually, not good enough. I'm actually okay. What I'm experiencing is this stress, this anxiety, whatever it is, this apprehension, this fear. The moment we create that distance, they can now use the objectivity lens on whatever that has happened that is leading them to not be present in the first place. So that is what we do, I guess, in a one-on-one setting outside of sport. And now in sport, what I do sort of transition that to is, I call that the state is everything as a concept, and that's what we integrate. Now, it's based on two things. One is a ritual and one is an anchor. Ritual is not too dissimilar to routines that we spoke about, but anchor is something that helps them tap into and get back to that state that leads them to be present in the current moment. So like the word actually indicates, anchor is something what you're anchored to, but unless that anchor is personalized to someone and the work that we do outside of sport, it doesn't really work. And this is where my concept of sort of state is everything comes in, anchored quite literally on giving them access to the zone, the flow, which just leads them to be present in the moment and therefore execute their skill.
So give us some examples of what some athletes have used as anchors. Is it one word? Is it sayings? What are some anchors that other athletes have used?
Absolutely. I've been working with the VFL squad recently, and an anchor for them is us. It's us, it's collective. It's how we actually play. It's how we actually hunt, get the ball. So the anchor actually reminds them, so they've basically written the anchor when they go out to play. And the anchor actually reminds them, so if they are faced with a situation that they seem it's out of their control, they can just tap into that anchor, and that takes it to the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is, cool, this anchor actually means that actually means this conversation that we've been having outside of this. Okay, cool, that just directly results in a change of state from within, and now that is translated into their performance and how they show up. Another example would be the Big Bash League G that I spoke about earlier. What we had written on his glove was some words that were specific to him. And every time he was actually facing a ball, All he had to do was just, do his Velcro. Just what I got him to do was a ritual was actually just, wipe one of his hand on top of his glove, just look at that and then take stance, then start to bat. Because now his mind was programmed in a way that he's looking at that and he's like, his mind is now remembering, his subconscious mind is remembering, cool, this was a conversation, this is a state that I need to be in. And that just results in them being present in the current moment. Now, obviously, above and beyond that, there are also times when, athletes just find it really hard. The anxiety is at its highest level. I don't know, be it the grand final, final, when the pressure's really turned on. So that is where things like, breath work comes in. That is where mindfulness comes in. One of the things that I also do, and I've also integrated as part of my work, is a bit of sort of mindfulness and managing that in the moment when the anxiety is at its highest. So the way I do that is, depending on if someone's right or left hand dominant, I ask them to, let's say if someone's right hand dominant, I ask them to use their dominant hand, be it right or left, and then, form that in the form of a hook. Just put that in their earlobe on the other side and just drag it down and take about 3 or 4 deep breaths. So what that's actually doing is you've got your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, so fight or flight and rest and rejuvenate. So the fight or flight just calms down as a result of that. That just dissipates the anxiety a bit more. That now results in them being a bit more present. So this is just one tool, there are about 20 of those like that. But to sort of break it.
That's fascinating. So just so there's a listener or viewer who's watching this and think, okay, just give us that example again, please, Nik, and be really specific of how like, are you doing that at the top of your mark as a bowler? I feel anxious. Do you just put your finger in your ear, or are you doing it at the top of the start of a running track and about to do a 100-meter race and you put your finger in it, like you're doing it before you step onto the field? How quickly does that work, and how soon before performance do you need to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would always say that these things only work if you've done some of the groundwork before. And these things are not, whilst they work in the moment, they won't always work if the groundwork has not been done. So understanding why is there performance anxiety in the first place. If someone hasn't done that work, these things would work in the moment, but not over the longer term. So I just want to preface that. But to answer your question, it's about 5 seconds. So it's the rule of 5 is what I say. So let's say someone's at the top of their mark, bowling a death over. I don't know, 20 runs are needed. They've conceded 12 runs, 3 more balls to go, 8 runs to get, right? So let's say the bowler's feeling ultra anxious. They've got tingly hands. Tingly hands is usually where my anxiety shows up, tingly hands, right? So all I'll do is I'll hold on to that hand and just sort of, push into it. Because I'm right hand dominant, I'll just make a hook. And if I'm bowling, I'll just put that at the top of my earlobe and just drag it down. And then if someone's talking to me, I'm just like, I just need about 2 or 3 seconds. And then I'll just close my eyes or even take a deep breath whilst I'm walking, because I know I'm just walking in a straight line. So they could just do that in between the game whilst all of this is happening. The same for a batter as well. So what I've usually done with batters is, because it's really hard to sort of get on and off the helmet, what I've done is, and this is not, I don't recommend this to everyone, but just sort of biting the glove really hard, because that just gives a different physiological response in your head. Because all of a sudden, if you're super anxious and just biting the glove really hard, it's like your body just goes into a state of shock, and then it has no option but to step out of it. Right? Okay. And this is where I say, like, these rituals just become very specific to the athlete. And I just want to then finish off by saying that this only works in the shorter term, but if they haven't done the work as to what's causing them performance anxiety in the first place constantly, so 2 is a pattern. So if it's happening constantly, then this needs to happen. The work needs to happen first for these things to work over time quite consistently.
Now, you go, Katie.
Sorry, I was going to say, it's interesting what you're saying about the ear, because actually you have a acupressure point in the top of your ear that releases anxiety, which is quite interesting. And I think it's that mind-body connection as well, isn't it? If you're getting that, if you're triggering your mind to come back to your body, it's then encouraging you to be truly present as well, isn't it? Like you said.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a fascinating thing, right? Like, if we just take our mind out of it and just look at a physiological response, our body is not actually that smart enough. Our mind is, but our body isn't actually that smart enough to understand the difference between anxiety and nervousness, or excitement and anxiety and nervousness. It's exactly the same. the excitement feeling can still be tingly, can still be shaky, can still be whatever's happening in your body. But now your mind now interprets that, oh, I'm anxious, oh, I'm nervous, or I'm excited, right? And that is purely based on an experience that someone has had in the past that now results in this feeling that we've got to be termed as something. Isn't that fascinating?
And I think that's the whole thing about anxiety and nerves, isn't it? At the end of the day, it's just a word. And like you say, it's like it's a label that you're given. And as soon as you turn that on its head, like you say, adrenaline is seen as something really positive. At the end of the day, it's energy. We're all energy and we need energy in order to perform. Whereas the connection to the nerves and the anxiety, that's just, those words and stress, straight away, just, get rid of them. Let's look at the positives that they create for you rather than the negatives. And so much of this is just looking at things coming from, they're the same thing, but you come from a different angle. And suddenly your perception around them changes, which then goes deeper into changing the belief. And with that, performance naturally can change
Absolutely.
as well. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Some amazing insight there. I've got a question that's just come up on the back of the physiological side of things. I saw something somewhere once that I thought seemed right, and it wasn't from a sports psychologist or psychologist, but you see a lot of athletes with their tongue between their lips, their tongue out. Michael Jordan was renowned for it. Jofra Archer runs in and bowls. And I heard this person say that when you're determined and you're trying to really fight, you often clench your jaw, and that makes your whole body stiff and tight. And when we want to play, we want to be quite loose and fluid and free. And by putting your tongue between your lips, you can't clench your jaw, and that then goes all the way down through your body and you're more relaxed. Is that something, let's go to you, Nik, is that something you use? And another thing I say to players is around smiling. As a batter, smile as the bowler's running in, because a smile tells the brain you're safe and you're not in this fight or flight, and you can relax the body a bit more. Is that something you've ever sort of used or come across?
Spot on. So that's exactly it. It is about ensuring that how do we move a person from sympathetic to parasympathetic, so fight or flight, to rest and rejuvenate. Now, I'm not saying that fight or flight is no good. Like fight or flight serves a phenomenal purpose, but that's when our life is under threat. Unfortunately, everyone actually lives their life as if it's under threat. And that might be as simple as, I want to face a ball from Jofra Archer, or shit, pardon my French. But absolutely. So that is exactly it, right? So what's actually happening in your body as a result of that is when you are in a state of everything is okay, you're able to execute your skill a lot better. That is what being present or being in the moment actually looks like. I'll only give a couple of examples. I mean, the tongue was great. The biting of the glove is another one as well. And there's a few others that I have, come up with over time and help athletes with. But the best way I can help anyone who's listening or watching this is think about what happens when someone drives a car stone cold sober versus when someone drives a car with some alcohol in their system. Right? By the mere nature of alcohol being in their system, they're going to be a different human being, and the car sort of, going to go wayward or in different places depending on the alcohol in their system. Now, as it relates to sport, if someone is playing constantly through fight or flight, that is what is happening internally. So the chemical reactions that are happening is there's a lot of cortisol, there's a lot of adrenaline, norepinephrine, sorry, I always get that wrong. That is what is pumped into our body. Now, because that is what is pumped into our body, what we practice at training, where there is no external pressure, is very different to when these chemicals are now all of a sudden present into our bodies. Now, that is a reason why most people are unable to actually execute that skill, because they haven't practiced it when these chemicals are at their highest. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That's fascinating. Katie, anything sort of you want to jump in on there?
Going back to, in terms of like the tongue and the face and that mind-body connection, there's simple things as well, like with the tongue, like you put the tongue to the top of the roof of your mouth and you can't have thoughts. But I think the reason you were describing is to create that relaxed sense in your body. And this is where, body language is so important, and that mind-body connection. I have this phrase that I use, wherever your mind goes, your body will follow. And I think I, really understood that when you're paralyzed, literally you cannot move, but your mind is still working. So if we can have that greater control over our mind and focus on what we want to do rather than what we don't want to do, and through the body language, like you were saying with smiling, like you can't have a feeling without having a thought. So if I was to say to your listeners now, try and feel angry, you can't feel angry without having a thought, or try and feel happy. You can't have a feeling without having a thought. Hence, when you were saying the smiling. And that's where our mind can play tricks, but we can play tricks on our body. And it's like, if you're feeling really angry, the idea, or, that anxiety or whatever it is, like you say, the trick of just putting that smile on your face or bouncing up and down, you shift your energy, because at the end of the day, everything is about energy. And there is, I think it was Einstein that, he was even, I think it was something like, everything is energy. Match the frequency of your reality, and you can't help but get that reality. And that's Einstein. He knows these, but energy and that the association with playing with the freedom and the flow, all these concepts, none of this is really that difficult if you know where your focus is and what you want, and understanding yourself better to enable that to happen. But so often, if we're not preparing and we haven't got the routines and we don't truly understand ourselves in what enables us to be the best that we can do, we're almost disabling rather than enabling.
Yeah, no, that's great. Frequency and Einstein. I mean, yeah, you had me there. I use exactly the same. So one of my other quotes, again, it's not mine. It is something that I have read, but frequency precedes form. So how you actually show up and therefore train precedes. So being that first is what actually precedes the form that you practice that in. So implying that in training, if I am going in with the frequency of, oh, I've scored 4 ducks, and therefore all I'm going to practice is just blocking the ball, leaving the ball, and just try and noodle the ball. And if that's not someone's game, all they're going to try and do is just avoid something that that has happened in the past. So that's a frequency, that's a mindset that they're actually showing up and stepping onto the field, be it at training or on game day. Guess what actually happens? They might end up scoring less than 10 runs anywhere on that day.
And that's what Katie's been saying as well, about focusing on the things you don't want to happen, as opposed to, I know that the best athletes, they go, I can't wait to show up today. I can't wait to show off what I'm capable of. I can't wait to be the man or the woman, the player of the match, as opposed to the mindset you're talking about, where a lot of younger athletes or people who are out of form go, I just don't want to be embarrassed again today. I just don't want to be crap. I just don't want to suck again today. And that's all they're focused on, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I've got this really simple exercise that I get people to do in order to identify what their peak performance state is. And it becomes so clear. I say to them, before, let's think of one of your best performances. So they're going, it's serving multiple purposes. It's working on different levels. It's accessing the subconscious mind. It's going back. It's reinforcing past success. Lots of different things going on. But is that before they even stepped out there? So it could have been in the morning when they woke up. It could be in their training, but before they went out to compete. And I'm like, what were you thinking? Okay, what were you feeling? And we now know that you can't have a feeling without the thought. So the thought drove that feeling. How were you acting? Because as we've said, the mind and the body is completely connected. And they write that down. Then when they were actually out there, so what were you doing during? So there's key words that are coming up. It's generally, words such as freedom, flow. I actually probably wasn't thinking that much. But, really just this positive mindset that's going on. Then I get them to go back to their worst performance. I don't often get them to go to the negative, but in this situation, it's really important to be able to identify the differences between the both. In their worst performance, that before, it will be things like, oh, I was thinking about other people. Didn't really sleep that well. I didn't do this. All the lacks, everything they weren't doing. But it's then important, then they go to the during and they see that before they even stepped out there, they created their outcome. And then you can go back to that best performance and go, look at all the things that you can then control from that. And from that, you can create a routine from it. And then that becomes part of your preparation. but it enables them to see how much control they truly have and how much that is created before they even step out and do whatever it is that they're going to do out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's
Amazing.
really nice.
I do something similar. I do like A game versus B game. Like, what does your best look like? And exactly the same sort of thing. Like what did you do that week? Did you train a lot? Did you have a week off? Like, what did you do that week where you had your absolute best? And then try and get them to do 2 or 3 performances and see if there's a trend. See if they can find a trend. And I know Mike Hussey, the famous Australian cricketer, he used to, after every good day he had, he would just get out an A4 piece of paper and just write down as many things as he could remember from that week, from that innings during, but also what did I do Monday night? What did I do Tuesday night? And then he just put it in his top drawer. And then after sort of a few months of 4 or 5 good performances, he pulled out all the bits of paper with a highlighter and he just sort of highlighted all the trends. And he went, okay, when I show up in this state, or when I'm thinking of these things, or when I'm having, and it might be like some physical things of like when I'm eating this breakfast or whatever, just to create some familiarity. We're just taking a break from this episode for a minute to tell you about the Cricket Mentoring Community. We're on a mission to build the world's best community of cricketers, coaches, and parents. So no matter where in the world you live or what level you're at right now, the Cricket Mentoring Community can help you. If you're committed to your game and serious about becoming the best cricketer you can be and person you can be off the field, then join cricketers from over 24 countries around the world in the Cricket Mentoring Community. Get access to myself and other CM mentors and experts from around the world as we aim to teach you the 6 pillars of success: technical, tactical, mental, emotional, physical, and lifestyle, so that you can become the best you can be. If this excites you and you're ready to take the next step in your journey, then click on the link in the description below and join the Cricket Mentoring Community now. Let's talk about overthinking. This is a word that comes up a lot with the athletes I work with. It's something that I'm sure you guys have heard many, many times. Katie, let's go to you first. How do you deal with someone who says, oh, I'm an overthinker, I think too much?
Yeah, I think I see it a lot with elite athletes. Well, with people, I think society now is really encouraging us to overthink with all this noise. There is so much happening, and this is where it's so key to enable time for the mind to be truly present and to know what is important, to know what to focus on. And like I said, your mind can play tricks, but you can play tricks on your mind. But it is just having those pause times. And also a lot of this is related, I think, as well to perfectionism, which I see in, all elite athletes. And at times, initially, perfectionism can be really beneficial because it can give you that motivation, that desire, that determination. But it also then can start affecting confidence because then you're over analysing, you're overthinking. As soon as you start overthinking, you're over complicating things. And this is where it's so important to just go back to the simple. What is it that you need to focus on? How can you help yourself create that focus? What is it that you can control? Because if not, you start to then lose that control and then you aren't present. And then that sense of freedom completely goes. That sense of flow goes because you're forcing rather than just being in that moment. And as soon as you start overthinking, you get over technical, and there's this cricketer I'm working with at the moment, bless him, that he was just in a place where his thoughts were just overruling his life. And this was affecting his life, playing and his life living. And then he's had this very interesting situation where he went for his regular health, the medical. And at the medical, they said that he'd got this heart condition. And suddenly, sliding doors moment, his life could have completely changed. So he's whisked up to London to all get checked out, called me, and he's got the all clear. However, this is something where this shows with the overthinking, his whole life could have completely changed. And we've then gone, wow, you have created an opportunity where this overthinking before wasn't creating great outcomes. Maybe that might have had an effect on your body. But now you've got this to use this as a springboard. Let's clarify your thoughts. Let's give you those simple, clear things. What is it that you truly want? And also by knowing that, you start to go, what is truly important in life? Life really is a privilege. And if I could have gone back to the times, I'm sure when I was rowing, there were times where I was overthinking. You know, in England, it can get really cold and wet when you're training. And there were times where I'm sure that I was like, oh, do I really want to do this training session, overthinking it? And now to have known that I could have gone back, and now I can't do that. And this is what I say to a lot of my athletes. It is truly a privilege to do what you do. You know, have that belief, take that opportunity, keep your thoughts simple, and go and do what you do. Be the best that you can be. But that's when the enjoyment is so important. And it was really interesting doing the workshops that we were doing recently, Skulls. One of the key things that kept on coming out was this fun, this enjoyment. And all of that is always linked to that freedom and that flow. As soon as you start forcing through this overthinking, it just doesn't work. You know, it's like they're going back, Nick, to it's the frequencies. You're on completely different levels. So when you're present, when you have clear, concise thoughts, you enable the flow, you enable the freedom. And oh, surprise, surprise, you're truly in the present, but that naturally creates a successful outcome without ever thinking about the outcome.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
amazing. Nick?
Fairly similar. I'm going to sound like a broken record if I say almost the same thing. The only thing different that I'd say is just paring back overthinking. So most of the times overthinking works for people because that stops them from taking action. And when someone doesn't take an action, it is an indicator that they are trying to perfect something or move away from something. So overthinking for me can also be a behavioral adaptation to perfectionism, which then leads to a lack of action. So that's how I'll sort of construct it for someone listening or watching this right now. So if someone is right now overthinking, what I would like for them to question and understand is, why is it that I'm overthinking about this in the first place? And depending on the answers that they get, I might be overthinking because I don't want to let someone down. Or I might be overthinking because I don't think I'm actually good enough. Now, depending on those answers, if you're wanting to let someone down, so then what is it from them that you specifically want that you think that if you don't achieve it, you'll actually let them down? And that is really sort of collapsing overthinking and just really going back to the basics of, yes, you are feeling something right now, but if you sort of track back, there will be scenarios and instances in there that is actually causing you to overthink about that. So once you sort of untangle that, this overthink that people, get caught up in, that will just be completely dissipated. That's what I'll say about overthinking. But underlying all of that, most often than not, overthink is lack of action, and that is because someone is trying to perfect something, and perfectionism for me is a subjective narrative. It doesn't exist, it doesn't exist in the world. What is perfect for someone isn't for the other person, and if there is something that is to be made perfect, the more there is to be made perfect. So if you get to a certain level, you want to get to the next one, and that's just the human game that we find ourselves in. So perfectionism doesn't exist. A lot of people say practice makes perfect. I just say practice makes permanent, not perfect.
Yeah, nice. I early on in my coaching, I actually wrote, early on in cricket mentoring, I wrote an article. I can't even remember what it's called, like perfectionism is strangling or something along those lines. And I stopped using the word perfect because early on in my coaching, I would use it perfect. And then I was like, that doesn't exist. And I asked Adam Voges on our recent episode of how do you juggle for a high performing athlete, this idea of never being satisfied and always wanting to be better, but not trying to be perfect. And it's a fine line. But guys, I'm mindful of time here, and I feel like we've hardly even scratched the surface. We've been going for over 50 minutes, and we've had some amazing conversations already. Let's just try and get through a few other topics quickly as if we can. But
rapid fire Q&A.
Yeah, pressure. Pressure is something that gets spoken a lot about in sport, in general life, and it's something that I speak a lot to my athletes about, and I've had some personal stories about sort of pressure and how I've dealt with it, good and bad, in my career. But how do you guys understand? We'll go to you first, Nick. How do you help players, athletes firstly frame what pressure is and how to deal with pressure in big moments.
Yeah, I love the conversation topic, pressure. All right. So the way I help athletes understand pressure is an external circumstance or an event triggers it. However, there is something present within you that actually gives rise to it. The best way I can explain that is think about a garden hose lying on the ground and there is a tap turned on. Obviously, the water is, flowing through that garden hose and the water is coming out on the other side. Now, if someone gently places their foot on that garden hose, now all of a sudden the space is reduced, but the same amount of water needs to pass through it. And that results in on the other side just going all the way, right? Like it's just going all over the place. Now, if someone can apply this to the subtle channels of their mind, it is when there is space that is reduced because of an external circumstance, things move faster. Now, when things move faster from within, what they're accustomed to in a time when they can train or when they have been training, that is very different to this new state that they find themselves in, which is created internally where things are moving faster. Now, all of a sudden, because things are moving faster, they're not really present in the moment. If they're not present in the moment, they're missing the ball. I don't know if it's a batter, they're nicking off. If it's a bowler, bowling wides or whatever that is. So that is how I help them understand and frame pressure in the first place. So simply, it is understanding the concept of space and flow or velocity. So when space is reduced, the same amount needs to come out on the other side. Now, once they understand and once they get that, it is about what can you do in that moment when you're faced with pressure. This goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which was the state is everything model, which is anchored on rituals and anchors as that model. So I was actually working with someone just a couple of hours ago at a client chat, and we were chatting about pressure. So the way I helped them frame pressure, so they were going to go for state selections at the end of this week. So what I asked her to write on her wrist is, would the player that you actually look up to, or would your role model function exactly that way if she is in the same situation? And all of a sudden she was like, no. And then the conversation went down the path of, oh, cool, that's because she's actually seeing that differently. That circumstance is not necessarily triggering anything for her to take on any pressure. So what I would encourage each and every one to think about when it comes to pressure is understand that there's an event that is happening over here, but it is triggering something within us that is giving us the actual experience of feeling under pressure. That is what I'll actually leave people with. And to then unpack that completely, it really is going back to what is personal to them, what is causing that internal state to be heightened in the first place. It is breaking all of that down. It is seeing where that is coming from, reframing that so that they can actually step into and perform. That's how I'll frame pressure and therefore help someone through it.
Nice one. Katie, anything to add there?
Yeah, I would say, very similar, Nick, and I love that we've got these concepts that are very similar. I would say it is the perception of pressure. It comes back to words again, the power of words. Pressure is also a privilege, and it is often I'll say with clients, go back to when you were a kid, and imagine if that kid could see you now doing what you're doing. Think about everything that you've done. This is your chance. This is your opportunity to go out there and do what you do. And, it's about that balance, finding that balance, maybe creating those thoughts to rebalance that. It's, again, going back, figuring out, I have this over the years, like building up things that people can identify that gives them confidence, which then if you're focusing on the confidence, the perception of pressure changes. You're coming at it again at a different angle. So we've got this process that we go through to identify exactly what gives confidence. So it might be past performances, it might be positive comments from others, long lists. They identify what their top, say, 5 things are. So then you'll have a routine. So that becomes their focus rather than their perception of pressure. And you can't always control the situation, yet you can control your response to that situation. So yeah, it's just coming back and finding the joy and realizing that it's a choice. And there are so many other people that would choose to be in the situation that they're about to be going into, and to go out there and do what they do, because if they've done all the other things, then it's just stepping in, isn't it? And stepping into their power, into their authentic self, which will enable them to go out there and perform and enjoy.
Yeah. Well, for me, like one of my best performances was in my last ever cricket match, and it was a final, and it was all because my perception had changed of what that event was.
Yeah.
I knew I was going to be retiring, and I thought to myself, so what? If I get a duck, like life goes on, and I don't play again anyway. And I walked into that big moment with the team struggling and the team needing me, and I had a really clear, calm perspective of it, as opposed to other moments like that when I was younger, where I was like, I've got to do well, and I was focused on the outcome, focused on what if I do well and I get further, or what if I do poorly, and it was always that what if thinking and that future thinking, as opposed to being far more calm, and just the change in perspective made such a difference for me in a big pressure moment.
It goes back to that force and that flow again, what you were saying, isn't it? When you're forcing and you're trying to control, and so, it just doesn't work. Whereas when you enable and you are in that flow and that freedom and that joy, it just opens up because you are truly present.
Yeah, it's like let go, don't go. Like, let go of the future. Like, let go of what are you feeling or carrying from the past, and don't go into the future. So, let go, don't go. And that just helps you just be present in the moment. And when you're present in the moment, pressure is just really that foreign concept that happens if you're just fully present in the moment, and you've done that work. We're really victims of our own perception. That's what I always say. I'm conscious that we're almost on time, so let's keep going.
We're just ticked over now, so I could keep asking questions all day long, but I just the biggest issue I see, there's a couple more things to cover really quickly. The biggest issue I see with athletes, in cricket especially, is they can play with freedom in the nets and they can play at their best. And as soon as they go into a match and there's consequence and there's pressure, they aren't able to bring their best. So, Nik, can I just go back to something you were talking about with the cortisol and the emotional side of things, the sort of physical side of things? How do you help an athlete who says that, comes to you and says, oh, I'm great in the nets, my skills are really good, but I just can't perform in a game?
Yeah, that's a great one, and that actually happens all the time. The best way I can frame that is every outcome has an intention and a consequence. When someone is training, there's absolutely no consequence. You're not going to get dropped. You probably play a poor shot. You hit the ball in the air. Everyone's like, oh yeah, cool, yeah, nice shot. And you feel, oh, you've actually hit a boundary. But when there is a presence of a consequence, which it might be enforced consequence, or it might be a consequence that might happen if they bowl a bad ball, have a bad game, or get out. The enforced consequence usually leads them to play within themselves and not express them freely. A lot of individuals, a lot of coaches these days, especially cricket, talk about just go out there and express yourself. Expressing yourself is playing with freedom. Now, to speak to the aspect of when there is a presence of a consequence, your mind, again, is in its past and future at exactly the same time, right? Which is where there is a presence of concern. Now, when there is a presence of concern, like you said, sometimes batters play with, like holding the bat really tightly, or bowlers bowl not actually executing their run-up properly, or sort of miss a step or hold the ball really, really tightly. The reason why they do that is because there is a presence of some sort of a concern underlying that consequence. If I don't bowl a good over, if I don't actually end up scoring the runs, I might not get picked, I might not make the squad, etc. Now, in the presence of that concern, what's actually happening in your body is, again, exactly the same thing. You are now, or the athlete is now, playing out of fight or flight. Now, when someone is, again, playing out of fight or flight, when their body is tense, now think about this, as I said, if anyone as a batter is listening to this, if your hands are really tight holding the bat and you're trying to absolutely smoke the ball's never going to go where you want it to go, because that's not how you would train. Because there is this mild presence of concern, you're latching onto something, and because you're latching onto something over here, which is a consequence or a concern which is up in the mind, your body is just following suit with you, and therefore that is leading you to hold the bat really tightly. So the way I help someone is, again, just collapse all of that, and it is introducing, or it's lifting their eyes beyond what they see right now, And one of the ways that I've really done this quite effectively was I was working with, again, let's take the same Big Bash guy for now. So what I was working with him was on, what if I told you that for the next 3 games, you'll probably score a duck, but in about a year, you'd actually end up playing for the Australian team and you would play the T20 World Cup. And, for the first couple of minutes, like, dude, what are you saying? Like, I'm not scoring runs. My strike rate's, 120. I was, 170 before that. I've scored 3 ducks. There's no way. It's like, I am not saying that you would get there right now. But what I'm actually saying is we are making space. We're making space for him to be okay losing. So we really need to make space for someone to lose to ensure that they actually start winning. So it is about lifting their eyes beyond the now. It is about lifting their eyes with what they see in front of them, helping them see the big future that they might have in front of them. And that actually gives them freedom in the present moment to play the way they want to play. That's like a really practical example as to how I did that with him. So it is about essentially making that space that all consequences belong. And when all consequences belong in who they are right now, they can now play through and choose to play through whatever consequence they want to choose. Which in this instance is like, cool. If I'm going to get to the Australian team in 12 months, I don't care. I'll just play how I want to.
Yeah, amazing. Katie, I'm going to jump to another question for you, conscious of time. I know this is something you've already mentioned, but meditation. Can you give our viewers and listeners a little insight into how you use meditation? Have you got anything specific you can tell us that's practical that we can sort of go away and sort of apply? But what is it that you use with meditation for athletes?
Yeah, meditation, again, just stripping it back to be really simple, is allowing you to get out of your head, more into your heart, which is like your instincts, that inner wisdom, that inner knowing, enabling you to be completely present. And when you're present, as we've talked about, that enables the flow, that enables the freedom, that enables the enjoyment. The more we can practice that off your sporting arena, off the field, the more you can then take that into your sport and into your life. I think with meditation, there's been lots of ways, again, overcomplicating it, that it has to be so structured, that it has to be a certain way. But I work with my athletes to discover their way. It's creating that space. So it could be as simple as, for some people, it really helps even just writing things down, like that time to reflect. It doesn't have to be this complete silence in your head. So I always think reflection is so important, because from reflection, you get your learnings, and learnings create growth. So there's simple questions that I might get my athletes to write down. What do I do well? So straight away, we're building up that self-confidence, the pat on the back, because so often we'll be going to the negative. Oh, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. What did I do well? What would I do differently? This is removing emotions. This is just getting to, right, what can I build upon? And what gave me confidence? So then you're starting to have that, that difference between your minds, bringing in that really, truly present state. Then I might also do meditation from, I think there was a time when we were talking together, Skulls, wasn't there? And there was a girl, there was an athlete that I'd sent over to her, this recording. It was before, she was a very good athlete, but she'd got a lot of fear associated with that. So I did like a visualization, self-hypnosis form of meditation. So with that, that's giving actual instructions to the subconscious mind in the changes that you want to happen, but also enabling the mind to be still. You might have some athletes I might have that might have a word. I've got a golfer on tour that his word is trust. So he might, before he goes out to play, he will find a quiet spot, but he will also visualize himself doing the round. And the way that I work with athletes, I also call it feelingization. So not only are you tapping into the visual, but you're also going deeper in how you would actually feel. But then he would then anchor in, similar to what you were saying, Nick, the word trust. So things are going deeper and deeper into the subconscious mind. But you can do this meditation so many different ways. But I think the main thing that I see is enabling people to be more aware of how to still their mind, how to give their mind this, it's like with mental health at the moment. No wonder people are literally burning out, because they are literally in their heads constantly. This is a change that I've seen over the last 20 odd years. The athletes that I'm getting now, junior elites, their minds are so hectic compared to even 10 years ago, because they're on their screens, they're scrolling. The mind is just never at peace. So this is something so important, not only for performance, but also for life, for health. And when you're truly present, that enables you to be the best that you can be. But so many different types. But I think my message with everything is there's always a simple way of doing this. And when you're working with the individual, it's finding out what is right for that particular individual. And I know with this visualization or with this meditation, I know this is where it goes back to my experience. At night, when I was in my hospital bed, couldn't move, I would get the nurses every night to move my legs. And I can remember some nights they were like, oh my God, why are we doing this? But I would shut my eyes and I would visualize, I would meditate that I would see myself walking. At no time did I ever not believe that I wasn't going to walk again. And then you have science that backs this up, that your mind doesn't know the difference between visualizing something and actually physically doing it. And this is what I know helped me. And this is where getting people back from injury, you do this, or I had this tennis player recently that his backhand, he was having trouble with it. And his coach came to me, and I knew that his coach never used to come to me unless there was a real problem. And I said to him, okay, what I want you to do is stop playing backhands to him. And he was just like freaking out. What do you mean? We've got to improve the backhand. But all we did was we did the feelingization, visualization for 2 weeks. And then I said to the coach, it's time. And he then started doing the backhands. And because his beliefs had changed and he'd seen himself doing it differently, he just nailed it.
Amazing, amazing. I was just going to go a bit deeper. I was just going to go a bit deeper into visualization, Nick, and that's some great sort of segue from meditation, pairing it with visualization. Nick, how do you use visualization with athletes?
Yeah, visualization is great. It's exactly the same. It is about ensuring that people believe that they can be and therefore visualize. Visualization as a tool doesn't work if there is no belief underpinning it, because someone can only visualize as far. So if someone is playing out of, well, I am actually not good enough to play at that level, and then I'm going to try and visualize that, oh, let me try and do this, then that's not going to work. And that's why it is a short-term performance strategy if the self-belief is not there. But with visualization, it's exactly the same. It is about, who do you see yourself to be? Can you actually step into that and therefore do the things that they do? So with, let's say the same BBL player right now, just keeping the team consistent. What we did when we had the sort of story state strategy and then the rituals and anchors is, now who do you actually see yourself playing as? And then we actually put in purposeful hours at training, playing those shots, playing that way, and trying to actually score. Let's say you've got 6 balls. How many runs are you going to score? You want to get to a strike rate of 170, 180. What shots are you going to play? Can you actually visualize them? And when the ball's actually thrown, can you just let your instinct take over? That is what coupling the mind side of things with the actual training comes in. The issue is those goals. Like a lot of people, you'd find a lot of people in interviews say that, oh, I just wasn't mentally prepared. But the question that I always ask anyone who's listening to this and everyone else is, yes, everyone knows the importance of the mental side of the game, but how many times you actually consistently train it outside of your skills, outside of your actual skills whilst playing cricket? And the answer would be maybe once every 3 months. That is the difference. So between the elite, the professional, the semi-professional, and the semi-professional that gets stuck at that level for about 8, 9, 10 years, it is because they haven't done that work consistently as it relates to the mind, so that they can visualize themselves to actually step into the sport and the level that they want to step into, and then keep performing at that level. And that is a part that absolutely needs to change. And that's a conversation that, I'm sure we'll have another time, and I can go into it way too deeper if I keep on going.
Yeah, well, that's why at Cricket Mentoring we talk about the 6 pillars of success: technical, tactical, mental, emotional, physical, and lifestyle. And I look back to my career growing up in a small town in Central Australia. I loved cricket as much as anyone. I trained my ass off. I was fitter than everyone. I sort of hit a lot of balls. I studied the game. I was tactically very good. And the whole missing piece for me was the mind and the sort of feeling emotion side of things. And that's why I'm so passionate about it now and trying to give athletes support around all 6 pillars and bringing in experts like you guys. Because for me, it's what's lacking in so many athletes, and it's what holds them back. That you can hit as many balls as you want, you can have the best technique in the world, you can understand the game well, but if you don't understand yourself as a person well, you're not going to get very far consistently. Now, I had good days. I had really good days, but I was inconsistent. And to me, that's what separates the best from the rest is the consistency of their performance. And that comes down to understanding themselves as a human being first so that they can show up as an athlete at their best, in their best state consistently. So, guys, I'm going to have to wrap it up. Unfortunately, we've been going an hour and 15 minutes. There's so much value there. We haven't touched on a whole heap of topics I was wanting to get to, but we will have to have a part 2 at some point. We can leave some other things for the future. Before I wrap up, guys, just tell our viewers and listeners how people can follow you or contact you if anyone wants any more info. Let's go with you, Katie.
On my Instagram is Mind Training for Sport. Contact me through Cricket Mentoring. I think this is a really great way of bringing everybody back to the community. I mean, if that's okay with you, Skulls, I just think it's really nice to keep us in the community. But and people can find me there. I've got emails, but yeah, I'm here. And it's great to be a part of this, and I love what you do.
Thank you. Yep. Awesome. Well, just to touch on that, Katie and Nik are both in the Cricket Mentoring Community, our online platform where we're bringing cricketers, coaches and parents together from sort of, at the moment, we've got over 24 countries represented. And Katie has recently run a mind training for sort of cricketers workshop. Nik is in there engaging and answering questions, and we're going to do something similar with both of them at some point again. So, Nik, tell us where people can follow you as well.
The dizzy heights of Instagram, _performance mindset, and the website, theperformancemindset.com.au. But similar to what you said, Scholes and Katie as well, engaging through cricket mentoring, joining, being part of the community, being part of the ride, just have those insights, just jump on there, and there'll be so many useful things like what we've spoken about, but within other domains as well.
Guys, thank you so much for your time, your knowledge, your generosity in sharing everything that sort of many, many, many years of experience has sort of taught you guys. You're both wonderful people and doing great things in this space. So thank you very much. And let's look forward to part 2 again sometime soon.
Thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Katie.
All right, take care. Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode or any of our content, then please do me a big favor and subscribe to our channel. The more subscribers we get, the bigger the guests we can get on and continue to help you on your journey of becoming the best you can be.